What is your best ghost paranormal experience story? Camping at a friend's family property with a group of friends. They had a huge dingy shop full of old tools and old furniture that was super creepy. Dirt floor. Clown paintings in the loft, not even kidding. We stayed up late drinking by the fire and I was the last one awake. Went to go pee on the side of the shop and stood about 5 feet away looking inside through the window. There was a fluorescent light on and I noticed what looked like a piece of paper or doll kind of floating around. I thought it was a moth at first, but it was moving in a very flowing figure-8 pattern that was very rhythmic. It reminded me of dangling a carrot. I watched it for maybe 20 seconds, which felt like forever. Then it quickly floated back to the corner of the shop where it was dark. There was also a wood chair near the corner that added to the creepiness. Could have been a moth though. I sat back down by the fire to finish my beer and have a smoke. No one else was awake, so I played Robot Unicorn Attack 2 on my phone for a while. I noticed my friend Mark pop out of his tent to pee, then go back in to go to sleep. I decided sleep sounded good, so I went to my tent and fell asleep. The next morning, we were having breakfast and Mark said, "I saw you guys sitting by the fire super late. How late did you stay up?" I told him I was probably 2 or 3 a.m. Then he said, "Who was up with you?" I told him I was the last man standing. He said, "I got up to pee and saw you on your phone and 2 people over your shoulder watching you play." He said one person looked bigger, so he thought it was one of our friends, who was a bigger dude. He said the other person was taller and skinny, but none of us are noticeably tall or skinny. Freaked me out. We still camp at that property once a year, but I do not go in the shop, and I go to sleep whenever my wife decides she is tired. Ghosts just trying to figure out WTF you doing. A bit paranormal perhaps. My grandfather got into the hospital on a Friday night. Nothing too unusual. He wasn't doing good, but he had been there before. The next day, I go to work. I am somewhat worried, but again, he'd been there before. I go on with my day. There are customers. A friend stops by and we talk, and I fill the rest of the time with homework. My grandfather is in the back of my mind, but I have other stuff going on. Right around 4 o'clock, I was chatting with a co-worker when I glanced at the clock and my stomach dropped. I randomly got filled with dread and profound sadness. I continue chatting, but the feeling persists. I check out at 5. The feeling of gloom persisting, and of course my brain goes to my grandfather. I just knew. I get home and my mother tells me my grandfather passed away. I ask around what time. 4 o'clock. I had a similar experience with my aunt. Just a normal day at work, and then I get this overwhelming feeling of dread and anxiety out of nowhere. An hour later I get a call from my mom letting me know that my aunt had been in a car crash an hour earlier and had died at the scene. When my middle child was about 3, we lived on an old house with a lot of poorly built self-done renovations done on it. There was an under-house storage area, workshop area accessible from one of the bedrooms. This workshop has a hatched door to the dirt under the house. Anyway, my daughter used to complain about the blue lady that lives under the house. We moved and never heard about it again. Ever hear the harmonica at night? Maybe she meant blues lady. Bleeding Gum Susan. Best damned blues singer on the Mississippi Delta. Small but weird. I rented a room in a New England farmhouse. Grad school. First night. About 2 in the morning. I had a very clear feeling I was being checked out by some sort of house spirits, but they approved. I went back to sleep. First time my girlfriend came over. She sat up in bed. I asked what is up, and it was almost word for word. Something was checking her out, but there was no threat. A few weeks later my brother came over. Next morning, unprompted as he came downstairs, he said he felt like something was checking him out at night, but it was okay. A new housemate later said the same thing his first morning. None of them knew each other. It was weird. TLDR, 4 guests in a New England farmhouse said spirits checked them out the first night. God, I wanna know what happens when someone gets checked out but they redeemed not okay. The spirit will firmly, yet in a friendly fashion, ask them to leave. I had just started a new job. The building I worked in was really old. Definitely pre-war. I had to stay a bit later than I normally would to get something done. And by the time I was packing up to leave, My floor was pretty empty. I needed to use the restroom before I left. So I walked over there. And as I approached the door, I saw someone else open the door and go in. I remember vividly that they were wearing a pink shirt and khakis. Because that is what I was wearing. 2. I was also mildly annoyed. Because I do not like being in the bathroom when someone else is in there. After deciding I still definitely needed to pee before the commute home, I entered the bathroom. But when I got in, it was completely empty. I do not know how to describe the energy in the room, but it was very tense, completely silent. I remember being able to hear my heartbeat. After standing completely frozen for what felt like 10 minutes, it was probably like 15 seconds. I turned right around and left. I had nightmares about that bathroom for weeks. It seemed so simple and uninteresting compared to a lot of other people's stories here. But it really shook me. There was something definitely off about the whole thing. Glad I work from home now. I think you saw yourself, bro. When I was like 14, I was with a friend riding mountain bikes way out in the woods. We decided to turn back and go home for the day. We must have been 2 miles from any houses. Walking up the hill we just rode down from was this old guy with minor clothes from the 1800s carrying a bucket. He was walking up the hill with his back towards us. He was only for a few seconds and then he disappeared. We were both silent when I said I thought I saw something. He goes, yeah, me too. He perfectly described the guy. We got out of there very quick. This was in northern AZ where they used to gold mine. There was even this old miner's cabin about a mile from us. This dude was real. He just dropped his invisibility cloak on accident. Should have followed him for his secret stash. Probably late to the party, but I used to work night shift in group homes for the mentally disabled or severely mentally ill. At one house I worked at, there was constant scratching coming from the walls. I figured it was just squirrels, but now I am not too sure. We had set a lot of traps and never caught anything. But this isn't what made me a believer. What happened was one night I was watching TV in the living room after all the residents had fallen asleep. Around 3 a.m. the doorbell starts ringing like someone is frantically pushing it. I get up and go to the door, but when I got there and opened it, nobody was there. Now the 3 things you need to know about the entryway. First is that the entry is into the living room and I can see it from the couch. Second is that the front door has a very large window on it. 2-3 of the door is window. And lastly, that the walkway to the front door now a 20-30 foot corridor that has 12 feet brick wall on either side. So in order to ding dong ditch, you'd have to run back that entire length to be able to duck around a corner. I figured I was being pranked by one of our more mischievous residents, so I went and checked on them all and they were all fast asleep. As soon as I finished shutting the last resident's door, the doorbell started frantically ringing again. I rushed to the door again only to find nobody there. This time I was determined to catch them, so I turned all the lights off except the TV and hid right beside the door so I'd be able to immediately open it when they came back. After 20 minutes the doorbell started going insane again. I jumped out and quickly turned on the walkway lights and looked out the window, but nobody was there. I then opened the doors thinking maybe they were hiding to the side of the door like I had. After seeing nobody there, my stomach dropped and I got a feeling of dread. I slowly started closing the door. As soon as the door was almost closed all the way, the doorbell started going nuts again and stayed that way for at least 15 minutes before stopping again. It was almost as if whatever it was took great pleasure in mocking and taunting me. I locked the door and ran my ass to the couch after turning on all the lights I could. Another disturbing thing about this is it seemed to read my mind. Whenever I got the urge to go outside and smoke, it would start with the doorbell again. It's like it didn't want me to forget it as there in a threat. Looking back, I am pretty sure it was a poltergeist. That place was rife with bad energy, as most group homes are. A lot of suffering and raw emotions happen at those places. It also didn't help we had a resident there who had literally gone insane after watching his parents get murdered in front of him, and a medium-low functioning schizophrenic with what I've confirmed of at least 8 distinct people talking to him in his head. Both of these residents are constantly having food knocked off their shelves walls in the middle of the night, and it is super common for them to be yelling at people that aren't there to shut up in the middle of the night. I used to think it was just mental illness, but now I am not too sure. Also, years later I worked in a facility where someone hung themselves in the bathroom. The bathroom door slams shut in the middle of the night if you try to leave it propped open, which is company policy. TL doctor worked night shift as a caregiver for people with mental illness and or intellectual disabilities. That bullshit I can explain happens. Ghosts wanted me to quit smoking. In 2012, my grandmother suffered a major stroke resulting in hospice in her home with her children, grandchildren, great-grandchildren by her side. Friends and family were able to come by freely and spend time with her. I was very close to my grandma and was lucky to be able to share much of this time with her. For anyone that has ever been through hospice with a loved one, you will understand how hard this type of thing can be. One night I was sitting at home in my office catching up on some work, when all of a sudden the room filled with the scent of perfume. I am not talking about a faint smell. I am saying it was very distinctive and strong throughout the entire room. I stopped everything I was doing and said out loud to myself, something is wrong. That is Gram. Capital I. Had not spoken to my family that day, but felt an urgent need to send a text message to my uncle whom was staying with her to ask, you guys okay? This was at 11:20 p.m. I got a response right away saying might want to come say goodbye. Not okay. I quickly rushed over. Upon arrival, the living room where my family was congregated was very silent, filled with blank faces. Without saying anything, I walked straight to my grandmother and kissed her on the forehead, saying I love her. She was still warm, but no longer breathing. I told my uncle that I was there because Grandma had brought me there. I asked when she passed and he replied saying 5 minutes before I sent my text. This puts the perfume in my office at nearly the exact same moment. Now, I am going to say that I was born into an Irish Catholic family, but I am in no way a religious person. I would have been the first person to discount this type of story if you told it to me. But I must say, this experience had me thinking that there really is something more out there. I felt it. A few years back, some friends and I were driving on some back roads in a patch of woods believed to be haunted. One of my friends was getting bored, so he rolled down his window and shouted, "Make something happen," or something along those lines. About 5 seconds after he rolls up the window, there is a strong, seemingly too well-timed to be natural knock on the window closest to me. We've seen some weird poop in those woods, but nothing that could not be explained by shadows or animals. There is no explanation for that knock. Nothing was thrown at the car. We weren't moving. It sounded the way a knock made by a human hand sounds. etc. Actually, later on, we heard a very feminine shriek in those woods, with no explanation either. So there's that. The shriek could have been a fox or a mountain lion, or Ned Flanders. When I was 7 or 8 years old, I was at my grandmother's house for Christmas and was playing hide and seek with some of my cousins. For context, the house was big, worn-down Victorian house that had been moved from its original location to the plot of land my grandmother owned. It was very cold and drafty, especially in certain rooms. The upstairs where we were playing consisted of 4 bedrooms, 3 of which opened to a large landing, one of which was down the longish hall. Most of us, along with our immediate families, were staying the night, but for some reason no one ever stayed in that 4th room. As a child, I always thought it was my grandfather's room. He died about 10 years prior to my birth, but in hindsight I am not sure why. As far as I know, that wasn't true, and certainly no one ever told me it was. Anyway, it was around 8 p.m. and my turn to count, and of course the person counting went into the separate room to do so. I sat on the bed, closed my eyes and counted to 20. When I opened my eyes, it was light out. Morning. I closed my eyes at night, counted to 20, and somehow 12 hours had passed. Of course, the immediate thought is that maybe I just fell asleep. I'll refute that with 3 points. First, why didn't my cousins come get me when I failed to seek them? Second, it was cold in that house. We would sleep multiple people to a bed under several blankets, at least one of which was usually electric. I can imagine sleeping through the night in that kind of cold without some kid of covering. And third, there is no way my parents wouldn't have bothered to come find me before they went sleep. And when they did find me, they wouldn't have left me there, especially without a blanket. I can tell you what happened. Maybe I had some sort of strange memory lapse that just happened to begin and end in the same location. Maybe the simulation lagged. Maybe I really did skip 12 hours. All I can say for sure is that something happened that night, and I've never been able to explain it.